Greetings and salutations, my name is OJ as always, and welcome back to another episode of the DBDathon, a series of videos where I go over every single killer in Dead by Daylight, from Trapper to the not so recently released Springtrap. I go over their lore, aka just reading their in-game bio, their gameplay / power, their teachable perks, as well as their design and cosmetics. And usually I'd say this at the end of the videos, but not many people make it to the end of the videos. So if you feel so inclined, please like, comment, and or subscribe if you enjoy this video. Today's object of obsession is none other than Carmina Mora, also known as TheArtist. Now, as I do in all of these videos, we can start by covering her lore, aka just reading her in-game bio, as I am not a lore guy. If you're looking for lore, I'd suggest someone like Pixelbush, who does really good videos on the lore of Dead by Daylight. But with that said, the artist's bio reads as such. Carmina Mora was a gifted artist who carried the guilt of her young brother's death. Growing up a rugged coastal village in southern Chile, she sketched the sublime landscapes of Patagonia. Sitting outside, she painted dramatic fjords while feeding the crows nested in the tree next to the house. She grew up carrying the guilt of her mother's sudden departure. Her father blamed Carmina for her mother's abandonment, which added to the grief. She became the caretaker of Matthias, her little brother, despite still being a child herself. A year later, Carmina was painting with Matthias outside when the telephone rang. Her father remained in the yard drinking his beer. Carmina rushed to the house to answer the phone and hung up a few seconds later. When she returned outside, Matthias was nowhere to be seen. She asked her father, but he had paid no attention to Matthias. She called her brother's name, looking for him everywhere. While searching, she saw a bright red coat floating on a narrow creek by the house. Matthias's jacket. She jumped into the creek and found him floating on the surface with vacant eyes, unblinking. He had fallen and drowned. Her scream tore the sky. Her father found Carmina sobbing on the creek's shore, clutching her brother's body in her arms, surrounded by a murder of crows. Her father snatched Matthias's body away from her, and she cried until her voice broke. The following morning, the world was cloaked in darkness. Her father did not say a word because he did not have to. Carmina knew it was all her fault. Months passed, yet her loss was as fresh as morning dew. Crippled with self-loathing, she could no longer paint. Without Matthias, life had no meaning. On the bleak morning of Matthias's birthday, Carmina walked to a narrow bridge several blocks away from home. She was convinced that nothing could bring her relief. Her mother was gone, her brother was dead, and her father blamed her for it all. She was convinced that she had nothing left to live for. Carmina walked to the railing of the bridge that stood over the turbulent river. Locals had nicknamed the spot Death Leap. Several cars drove by Carmina, but none stopped. No one seemed to care. She climbed over the railing, and her legs wobbled as she stood on the lip of the bridge. She looked down, watching the fierce river smash into the giant boulder. She closed her eyes. "See you soon, Matthias." Suddenly, a cacophony of caws filled the sky. Carmina opened her eyes and saw a black cloud of feathers flying towards her. The cloud split open and glossy black crows dove from the sky. One landed on her shoulder and stared intently into Carmina's eyes, as if peering into her soul. Her grip on the railing loosened and the crow cawed vacuously. Carmina stared at the crow, confused. Another crow landed on the railing, then another. Soon, a flock of crows were covering the railing of the bridge, staying close to her. She felt their heavy stare on her, calculative and enigmatic, as if they were assessing her. She looked down for a second, and a thunder of caws interrupted her dark impulse. The crows seemed to care about her well-being. As she dangled over the edge with the wind blowing through her raven hair, Carmina felt akin to them. For the first time since Matthias had died, Carmina did not feel alone. She returned home, giving life another chance. The crows left, but Carmina suspected that if anything happened to her, they would return. Inspired by her ordeal, Carmina picked up a brush. In the weeks that followed, she painted her experience, using black ink to depict the death leap with a black cloud of feathers, the murder of crows that saved her life. The experience was transformative and launched her signature black ink surrealist art. After several years, some colour pierced the darkness, and this shift of medium expanded her art form. She painted large-scale murals on busy street corners, designed grandiose costumes, and recited militant poetry. Carmina's art displayed local intimate tragedies on a large scale, making them impossible to ignore, and everywhere she performed, crows followed. Her performances grew bold and drew the attention of artists who found her style invigorating. She grew close to a group of painters who understood her iconoclastic vision. Her performances launched the large-scale surrealist movement, which became a phenomenon. Her renown grew enough to attract the commission of multinational enterprise, the VAC label. Carmina investigated the group, discovering that they were gifted art pieces to select disreputable congressmen. VAC's commissioned artist seemed to disappear afterward. Determined to expose the group's links to corrupt politics, Carmina accepted VAC's commissions. The following week, Carmina painted a giant mural on a cemetery columbarium, displaying the VAC label logo as a surrealist Grim Reaper harvesting the fields of Chilean families. She wore a theatrical dress as she painted, on which she had stitched a poem about political revolution. The piece sparked a radical debate about corruption. The controversy painted a target on Carmina's back. After receiving anonymous death threats, she took refuge in her father's house, bringing along her closest friends for safety. That night, a gang of masked gunmen broke into the house. They swiftly subdued Carmina and her friends, threw them in a van, and drove off. The following morning, a dry breeze blew sand on Carmina's face, awakening her. She was seated in a chair in the middle of the desert, with her legs tied and her hands handcuffed. Her friends were lying on the ground, tied up. A shadow fell over her face. Carmina looked up. A man, dressed in a long robe, with his face hidden in a dark hood, approached her. He pulled a silvery knife from his robe. He grabbed her hands and recited a hymn in an unfamiliar language. Carmina held his gaze. He paused and brought down his blade with a sudden blow. She cried in agony as her friends woke to a terrible sight. Carmina's severed hands falling in the sand. The hooded man smiled in satisfaction. "How are you going to paint now?" Carmina cursed and screamed at him, wriggling against the bonds on her legs. The man grabbed Carmina's chin. She spat in his face. He grunted and pried her mouth open, pulling out her tongue. Carmina struggled in his hold. In a violent blow, he chopped off Carmina's tongue. She howled in anguish. The man wiped his blade on his robe, leaving a trail of blood. "How are you going to recite poems now?" Sorrow swelled in Carmina's chest, sharper than pain. Overwhelmed by uncontrollable rage, grief and loss overcame her senses. She had lost her little brother, and she had lost the only way to cope with such pain. Carmina screamed like on the day her brother died. Raucous caws echoed throughout the wasteland. The sky was obscured by a cyclone of dark clouds. Black feathers fell on Carmina's bleeding arms. She looked up and saw a torrent of crows erupting from the crowds, diving on the hooded man. As the ravenous crows pecked at his flesh mercilessly, Carmina smiled, watching her surrealist art coming to life. But her heart lurched with rage when she saw the crows move on to their next target, her friends on the ground. She screamed as waves of pain, guilt and fright overwhelmed her, but it was in vain. The ravenous crows were uncontrollable. Darkness fell over her eyes as her friends' agonizing screams grew more acute. Death was coming, and again, it was her fault. A deep black fog engulfed her. Now, Carmina's Law is probably the most or the best example of a tragic character. She is by far the woman, unless I'm just not remembering things, or maybe it's because I haven't really read everyone's law, but thus far, Carmina's story is probably the most tragic, because this poor woman from birth, it seems like, was set up to be a killer within the entity's realm. I'm sure I don't need to tell you, but the constant reference and significance of crows is the entity's presence. We know full well that the entity, on occasion, portrays himself as crows. That's why they're in the trials watching your every move when you're running around. That explains a lot, and I just feel really, really bad for her. The poor woman can't get a break. Oh, my brother just died. Man, it's like the entity was actively manipulating her at all times. Like, when she went to, jump off of the bridge, the crows appeared to stop her. They seemed like, a good influence. But it's just the entity preventing her from dying early so it can then just ruin her life at a later date and then drag her into the fog. I really love how the entity is depicted, especially in, like, Carmina's story. How it's this just master manipulator that always will get its way in some way, shape or form. It's very rare that the entity is, like, sort of not getting what it wants. Even from, say, another example is like the Spirit. She's also a tragic character, but it's quite clear that her father was possessed in some way by the entity to drag her into the fog as well. Like, the way it manipulates the world, like the real world, to get people into the realm has always been really, really intriguing to me. And I do like the entity a lot, but speaking of the artist, her lore is really, really fantastic. She is the pinnacle of these tragic characters that we've kind of talked about over the last couple videos, like Spirit, and I can't really think of any other tragic characters off the top of my head. It's just Spirit on my head right now. But yeah, I really, really like her lore, and with all of that said, let us move on to her gameplay / her power. Now, just like a few other killers we have mentioned in this series thus far, Carmina, by definition or technicality, is a ranged killer. And, as always, they must ask the question, what can we do to make this killer, who is ranged, different from the others? Their answer was the Birds of Torment, which is the name of her power. She starts the trial with 3 tokens, and is able to create birds that have a flight path visualized in front of them. When these birds hit someone, they will cause, like, crows to constantly swarm whatever survivor is hit, and when swarmed, they have that sort of status effect on them. However, if you hit them again with another crow, they will then take a point of damage as long as they have the birds on them. Survivors can get rid of these birds by just constantly, like, flinging their arms, and they can also get rid of them by entering a locker. If the birds fail to hit a survivor and sort of like narrowly pass them, it will trigger killer instinct for a couple of seconds. And yeah, that is basically her power, just on its face. I'm gonna say something that's not really that controversial. I don't think it should be this controversial. You shouldn't be able to get rid of the crows by entering a locker. I'm being very serious right now. I think she struggles enough, right? I like the artist. I really like her. She's got one of my favourite lore entries in the game, and she's always been a personal favourite of mine. Just sort of, not like top of the top, right? But she's kind of one of those personal favourites. I can't really explain why I like her as much as I do. She's always kind of just clicked with me, especially on the gameplay front. She was, funny enough, my second ever Prestige 3 killer after Nemesis, to no one's surprise. I've always struggled with her power and how it isn't as strong as, say, other ranged killers. I'd argue that it's not as strong as, say, I don't know, Unknown. We'll get to him eventually, or it eventually. Or I don't think it's as strong as Huntress's. I wouldn't say she has the weakest range power. Maybe she does. I don't know. Her power's just kind of weird. You have to put in so much effort to just get an injured state. The effort that other killers don't have to put in. But the counterplay to her power is pathetically easy to, achieve. You're swarmed with crows, say mid-chase. I'm not kidding. You could probably jump in a locker, jump back out, and get rid of them, and then what? Mid-chase, you could probably do that. Then what? She has to have reapplied the crows. It feels Like, you're putting in so much effort for such little reward. And I think it relates to the fact that, or what is one of the causes of why no one really plays her. She's got quite a low skill floor, so she's quite easy to play, I'd say. I'd say it's like, for an average player, it's easy to understand how her power works and kind of use it at a base level. But man, the skill ceiling on her is astronomical. But you could be the best artist in the world, and still they can just jump in a locker and get rid of, like, your power. Just like that. Like, someone else who has to, hit someone twice with their range power is the unknown. But what is the unknown's counter? You have to stare at him, or stare at it for quite a while, quite a decent amount of time. That's hard to do. That's hard to keep a constant line of sight, especially considering that most of the time you will be, like, running around high walls that prevent your actual direct line of sight with that killer, meaning that the UVX infection stays on for a while. But Carmina is just jumping a locker. Why? Why? I don't get it. Either way, though, I do really like her gameplay. There are a lot of interesting things you can do with the crows, such as like the double bird method. I call it the bird is the word, right? The bird is the word. I remember seeing that on Twitter. Anyways, where you kind of align two crows, so one hits them first, and then the other one follows up almost immediately after, so you basically get a free hit off of just two crows. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff kind of holding her back for no good reason. I also need to mention that the auras of the crows' kind of pathways when they're mid-flight are seen by survivors, if I remember rightly. Like, I don't think I'm tripping when I say that, but yeah, her gameplay can be really good. We just need to get rid of that locker thing. Why? And if anyone's worrying, but then I have to sit around and smack away the birds, then nerf the length that the birds stay on you, or the length of time it takes to repel the birds. It's 8 seconds, according to what I'm reading. So I don't know, drop it down to 6, drop it down to 7, anything. I just don't think the locker thing should be there, and it's always been my biggest frustration with her. I think you can maybe see it a few times in the background, but like in the background gameplay that I have always on, but still, yeah, I want to like her. I really do like her gameplay, but it's just that the counterplay to her is pathetically easy to do when other killers who have similar powers to her don't have that. They don't have that pathetically easy counterplay. And it's kind of always yeah, that's a word now. Always with a D on the end. Always annoyed me. But anyways, let us move on to something that is unanimously good, aka her teachable perks. The first of her perks is known as Grim Embrace, with a description reading as such: your act of servitude to the entity has not gone unnoticed. Each time a survivor is hooked for the first time, gain a token. When moving 16 meters away from the hook, all generators are blocked for 6, 8, or 10 seconds. Upon reaching 4 tokens, when moving 16 meters away from a hook, the entity blocks all generators for 40 seconds. The Obsession's aura is revealed to you for up to 6 seconds. Then, Grim Embrace deactivates. The killer can only be obsessed with one survivor at a time, and its flavor text reading, "Are we nothing but prisoners to our sorrow?" A quote from Carmina Mora. This is one of the best perks in the game. It is a very passive perk, as most of the best perks are. All it requires you to do is hook a survivor, move away from them, and bang! All the generators on the map are blocked. It's a very, very strong perk. It's always been one of the little trifecta of gen blocking perks, with the other two being like, I don't know, Deadlock and, what's it called? Dead Man Switch, that one. It's part of that little trifecta of unbelievably strong gen blocking perks. It's one of the best perks in the game. I feel like I don't need to say too much on it. It's not the best one. I'd still say Dead Man Switch is probably the best one, because 50 seconds of a block on a gen is very strong, but it is a very strong perk, do not get me wrong. But I don't have too much to say on it. I'm sure everyone who's probably watching this video understands its strengths, both on the killer and survivor sides. So with that said, let's move on to her second perk. The second perk is known as Scourge Hook Pain Resonance, with a description reading as such: overwhelming pain reverberates outwards into chaos. At the start of a trial, 4 random hooks are changed into scourge hooks. You see their auras in white. You start the trial with 4 tokens, 1 for each survivor. If a generator is available when that survivor is hooked on a scourge hook, lose a token. The generator with the most progress explodes, instantly losing 10, 15 or 20% progress, and will start to regress. Survivors repairing said generator will scream. Once you have no tokens, pain resonance deactivates for the rest of the trial. With flavortext reading, the pain spills beyond flesh and darkness, staining the horizon. A quote from presumably a poem called The Girl in Shadow by Kami Nomura. This is the best perk in the entire game, bar none. It is, as I've said many times before, one of the best perks because it is such a passive perk. Hook a survivor on a scourge hook. Not difficult in any way, shape or form. What is your reward? 20% progress regression as well as continuous regression afterwards. There is a reason that almost every killer match that you play as or you go against probably will be running this perk. On the website that I like to look at this stuff from, 30% of killers use this perk in the last 14 days. It is the #1 most used killer perk on this website. This perk is insane. It's the best perk, bar none. I don't think it will ever be bad. It's impossible to be bad. I'm sure you can hear my dog vaguely barking in the background. I do apologize for that. This perk is insane. Genuinely insane. It is further evidence of the passive play that I am not particularly too fond of, but I can't deny that this perk is so strong. Unbelievably so. And I'm sure you've heard it so many times before. I don't think this perk could ever be bad unless they genuinely, like, even if they nerfed it to 10%, like its highest value was 10, I'd still think it would be in like one of the top 5 most used perks. It's just that good. You don't have to do anything to get value out of it. You get a down. That's all you have to do. You're going to be doing that anyways. It's not difficult whatsoever, and it is the best perk in the game, bar none. But with that said, let's move on to her third perk. Her third perk is known as Hex Pentimento, with a description reading as such. You see the aura of cleansed totems and can rekindle each totem once. When a totem is rekindled, survivors heal and repair 20% slower, with an extra 1, 2 or 3% for each additional rekindled totem. If all 5 totems are rekindled simultaneously, all totems are permanently blocked by the entity. Survivors cursed by this perk see the aura of rekindled totems within 16 meters, and it has flavortext reading, "For a pentimento is an inherently concealed piece of art. There is something to be said of the desire to discover that which is beyond." A quote from A Guide to Art and Process, 1961. Now, this is one of the best hex perks in the entire game. I would argue as such. I believe that it is befitting and works very well. It's one of the two, right? It's one of the 2 perks you'll be using in almost any hex build. Hex Undying, for when you have like a very strong hex totem that you want to keep up at all time, like Blood Favor or, you know, stuff like that. And Pentimento is the other one, where you want all of your totems to be destroyed. I found it works very well with, what is it called? Hex Plaything, the perk from the Pinhead, because survivors will be cleansing that so they don't suffer from Oblivious, giving you basically free Pentimento value. And obviously, in very, very rare circumstances, you can get to the point where you have all 5 up at once, and that results in, if I am not wrong, a 35%, 35%, wow, I'm trying to have to do maths mid-video, wait a minute, I think it's like 32% regression or slowdown on their heal and repair stuff. That is insane, and they can't even get rid of it. However, by the time you actually get that up, like all 5 done at once, the game's probably over. Let's be honest. It's incredibly rare, but even just the 20% like heal and repair slowdown is still really strong. Just 1 totem being up is really strong. It's a very good perk. However, not all killers can use it, as it does require you to move around the map and rekindle the totems that have been destroyed, which not all killers have the map pressure or movement to make that work. Someone like the Trapper probably couldn't make this perk work because he's travelling around the map as is to set down traps. He doesn't need the extra job of going to rekindle totems and such. But anyways, I think her perk lineup is the best in the game, bar none. Pinhead is kind of not, he is a close second, but he's now technically base perks, so she now gets to sit at the very top of the game without much competition. So another win for Carmina Mora, as they say. But anyways, with that said, let's move on to her design / my favourite and least favourite cosmetics. Now, the artist's design, I believe, is one of the better ones amongst the original Killer roster, mostly due to the fact, not specifically of how she looks. I do think how she looks is quite cool. I am very fond of the sort of bird feather motif on her dress, or like around the neck and around the hips. And I do think the ink just seeping from her eyes and mouth and the cuts on her like hip and the bits on her legs, that all looks really, really cool, right? But what's always, that's not a word, that's twice I've said that. What's always kind of intrigued me or interests me about her design is like the way she reacts and the way she like exists. It's really hard to say, but like, for example, her intro animation into a trial is her looking at her severed hand as the sort of inky weapon sort of emerges from it. I really like that. I like how she's kind of like her tragic tale, like in her lore, is kind of like twisted to work within gameplay. Her constant bird-esque cawings are like her crying out for help, but she can't cry out for help. The entity has transformed her into the one thing that gave her solace, turned her into a bird woman, and used the ink that she used to relieve herself of the pain and pressure of her life and made it the thing that she is using to inflict pain onto others. It is a way of like taking her tragic tale of the birds saving her and ink giving her new hope in life and using it against her. I think that is a fantastic design choice of having her tragic tale be portrayed and manipulated by the entity to turn her into a killer. I think it's genuinely fantastic. And I'm going to be honest, the inky stuff has always kind of freaked me out. I'm not very fond of like the idea of drowning in ink. I don't know why specifically ink, but seeing her Mori for the first time where she like shoves her hand down your throat, it just made me gag. I don't like it. It's gross. But anyways, with my praise for her base design thrown out, let us talk about my favourite and least favourite cosmetics. Now, as I say in every single one of these videos, when it comes to picking my favourite and least favourite cosmetics, when it comes to least favourite specifically, I'm not allowed to pick anything below a very rare, because if I could, I'd just pick some terrible green rarity recolor and call it a day, which is boring. And when it comes to favourites, I'm allowed to pick whatever I want. Speaking of least favourites, we have Portent of Extinction, a mouthful of name for a skin that I believe is quite over-designed. I know that's a weird word, because what counts as over-designed, but there is a lot going on here. The dress itself that she's wearing is quite pretty, weirdly. I quite like the drab green, beige and brown colour scheme, and I think the flowers on her hips are quite cool. It's just everything on like her back and her head is always just put me off. The glowing eyes, I think giving her like a Plague Doctor Crow mask is a really good idea, but this is not it. The mask looks a bit much with the flowers coming out of it and all the tubes, and there's all this dripping green fluorescent colours, all the tubes on her head and shoulders, and obviously the back of her has these enormous flapping wings that are always moving, and there's too much going on, and I don't think it incorporates her ink very well into the design. That's always been a huge frustration for me, that her ink never changes from being like the colour black. It's clear in her lore that she uses other colours. She started incorporating colour into her work. So why does she just keep getting black weapons? It's not like it's going to be a visual change up that ruins a survivor's day. Like, just give her like a neon green, like, even if you just tint the end of her weapon to be neon green, and it would just improve things. Or tint, say, you know, the icy skin that she has. Tint the end of her ink weapon to be blue. Like, it's not difficult, and they've done it before. Some of her Deep Rift, or one of her Deep Rift cosmetics does it. It like changes the color of her weapon to be, you know, dark blue. And I think the Castlevania Rift weapon, it changed the ink to be like a dark red. Like, that's what holds a lot of her skins back for me. It's just that the weapons don't usually match up with the skin, and this is one such example. Ignoring the heavy amount of over design, there's just too much going on for me to like it. But anyways, with that said, let's move on to my favourite skin. Said favourite skin is a very recent one, I will give it that, and it is the legendary skin that changes the artist to be The Witcher 3's Leshen. This skin is insane. The artist, I need to say this, the artist consistently just gets some of the best legendary skins in the entire game. She got the Jabberwock, which is shockingly good. She got the Junji Ito skin, which is incredible. She's gotten the Leshen, which, by the way, fantastically designed. And now she's getting the Boule brother skin. Like, she just keeps getting really, really good legendary skins. But speaking of the Leshen specifically, I am a very big fan of, like, deer creatures. I think deers as monsters has a lot of potential to it, and this sort of grassy woodland creature using a deer skull as its head is, like, really cool. It looks awesome. It might not actually be a deer, it could be something else, but I don't know my differences. It could be an elk, maybe, because of the horns and how big they are, but this is just really, really cool looking. This looks awesome. The grassy hands, the fact that they incorporate the ink sort of well, or it kind of well. The ink doesn't really mesh well with the grassy look, but they did do something I was just complaining about. They actually made her inky weapon have tints and bits of green on it. Great, that's awesome. That's what I want. I want them to color her ink in these skins to kind of match the aesthetics of the skins, and this was a really good attempt. Obviously, it's still, you could chalk up the ink to being something weird, but the explanation for why the Leshen is using ink, no one will ever know. But I think this is a really, really good skin, and it looks incredible. And it also changes up her noises, I believe, in the trials. So it's not like a bird calls, it's more like earthly, creepy whispers from the Leshen. Just as a note, I've never played Witcher 3. I do have it on my Steam, like, library, but I've just never played it. I might do it one day. Maybe I'll make it a video, who knows. But anyways, this skin is absolutely fantastic, and with that said, we are at the end of the video. I would like to give all of you my thanks for the recent upsurge in the Pinhead video. I have no idea how that video got like 800 views 3 days after its upload, but I'm not complaining in any way, shape or form. But again, thank you for watching. If you've made it this far into the video, I hope you have a good morning, afternoon, evening, etc. And I shall see you in the next video, where we talk about none other than the rings on Ryo, also known as Sadako.